Mr. Poroshenko, so that's put me in my place. There's no uncertainty here. Everything is great for the next few months. But we're going to move straight now into some discussion. And broadly, we're going to focus on two areas, split it into two areas. We're going to look at the external context and the external challenges, potential external challenges to the scenario of certainty that Mr. Poroshenko has set out. And then we will talk about, move on to talk more about the internal political situation and how that may develop. In the middle, there will be some questions put to you, the audience, in which you will have the opportunity to vote. So please keep these little things that you hopefully will have found on your seat or been given as you came in, which are voting modules, because they will come into play later on, and I'll explain how to use those when we get to the votes. But first of all, let's talk about some of the potential challenges, and I think, if you like, the elephant in the room right now, and the presence on Ukraine's borders, of course, is Russia, and what part Russia may play in developments in the coming months. And I'd like to turn perhaps to Valery Charlie to start off the discussion on this. Valery, how likely do you see the possibility of further Russian intervention, be it in a direct military way, even the possibility of an invasion, given the size of the forces that are on the borders, or a different scenario in which we see something happening in the east or south of the country, similar to what we saw in Crimea, perhaps involving Little Green Men? Or could there be other attempts by Russia to disrupt the elections, the election process, given that the establishment of a freely and popularly elected president will be quite a challenge to the scenario that Russia is presenting at the moment of how things are developing in Ukraine?
I'm completely right. That's presidential election is a crucial, important thing for us, and thanks God we have now the candidates who can speak with you the common language. It's not about English or Russian. It's about common language of understanding of challenges for Ukraine and common understanding how to resolve the problem. Russia not surprised us. Russia shocked us. And to be frank with you, we are never ever waiting for such developments on our borders. That's why now only planning how to react for that. And then military planning is planning in economy, and even in civil society we feel the real challenge to destroy our friendly relationship among the people. Speaking about military operation, definitely only one person in the world knows about that. It's Mr. Putin. And I think that he is not regret plan A, I mean the continuous invasion to Ukrainian territory, but now try to achieve the same goals with diplomatic and other mechanisms to push the Western countries to be a part of the big geopolitical game, to decide about Ukraine without Ukraine. So that's it would be the real mistake if Western countries agreed with that. And I think this only response that we can give to put on the table and to answer, to find for these challenges is a presidential election, new president, government effective working as today, and definitely after that this will not be continuous about the next stage of invasion. So Mr. Putin go as far as we allow him to Ukraine. We have the chance to avoid any escalation, and we work very effectively with clear understanding what we must achieve and to act in that direction.
Thank you. I think Alexei Haran would like to come in and add some comments to that.
Yes, thank you, Neil. I think the original plan of Mr. Putin actually failed because we should understand that Crimea was only step number one in his calculation, and the basic idea was to provoke clashes in Crimea with Ukrainian army and then use it as a pretext, like in Georgian scenario, to destabilize the situation in eastern part of the country and then to use perhaps large-scale attack on eastern frontiers of Ukraine. That scenario didn't work. And I agree with Mr. Poroshenko that it seems that right now the threat of destabilization in eastern and southern Ukraine is lowering. Definitely we shouldn't exclude Russian attempts to destabilize the situation on the eve of presidential elections, maybe on May 9th, maybe early, maybe closer to elections. But I think that without Russian interference, definitely the legitimization of new power would be very, very smooth. Actually, even in Crimea, without Russian interference, the process was quite smooth, including Crimea as well. I think that now, if the original plan of Mr. Putin doesn't work, then he will try, I agree with Mr. Charlie, he will try to use other methods to play with the idea of so-called federalization of Ukraine. And that's why actually which Putin is proposing to Western countries. So let's have federalized Ukraine. Just a comparison. Imagine that you have a building, hotel, and you have one person who is renting the room here in the hotel. At a certain point, he's coming with a gun, seizing this apartment, saying, I will not pay for it anymore, and now let's restructure the whole hotel according to my wish. That's actually what Mr. Putin is proposing to Ukraine. So he's dictating his own plan, his vision about the future of Ukraine, federalization of Ukraine. So I think this is unacceptable, and I hope very much that the Western partners of Ukraine would not buy these Russian arguments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexei. I'd like to talk about federalization a little later because it's clearly an important subject, and it's one that foreign visitors, I'm sure, will have seen quite a bit of discussion about in recent days. But let's just stay for the moment with Russia's possible role and how things may develop in the country. I'd like to go back perhaps to Mr. Charlie and just ask whether you still see any possibility that there could be attempts in the east or the south to hold some kind of referendum on independence, or attempts by Russia to still to foment some kind of move towards that. I mean, we have seen that the Donetsk Regional Council has put forward a request for a referendum there. How much of a threat does separatism remain in your view?
You know, I have carefully read the programs of the candidates. For example, the Poroshenko program is not federalization, it's decentralization, more rights to the region. It's a thinking in the right direction. So I can imagine why the people living in the eastern part of Ukraine to want to find another model. They want to live in prosperity, they want to live in the new country, and be frank with you, the central government sometimes forget about Crimea, sometimes in the previous year forget about the Donetsk, and the responsibility only taken by the local group is not good response. We need to have a strategy for the country. About referenda, definitely if any part of Ukraine, as in Crimea, try to organize referenda, it will not be according to Ukrainian constitution. But now I do not see this challenge in this part of Ukraine. According to the latest polls, when you ask by Razumkov Center, if you ask about federalization, there's only minority, and mostly in Crimea, 40% support that before the crisis. In the rest of the regions of Ukraine, it's less than 20%. even in Donetsk in 23%. So it's not the main challenge for Ukraine now. The main challenge now to keep unanimity, to keep in a political agenda, this keep unanimity that we achieved during the Euro revolution. Because we go through the very dramatic developments, and Ukraine will never ever live as before. So now the response even for that question, for federalization, on this discussion about separatism, is selection. Mr. Dobkin, the 5 persons from these regions goes to compete with Mr. Poroshenko, with Mr. Tymoshenko. So this will be answer. If they will win, they can speak about decentralization, federalization. If we have the president who is a united country, so we have to support.
Mr. Poroshenko, would you like to come in on this question on the possibility of further moves towards separatism in the regions and how we can address that?
Point number 1. Under no circumstances we allow any federalization. The federalization is not Ukrainian scenario. For the strategist outside of the Ukraine, the only way how to have Crimea number 2, Crimea number 3, Crimea number 4 is first step federalization law. No chance. For this we have no any basis, no any reasons. We don't have any immediate or strategic danger. Again, neither in Kharkov, nor in Donetsk, nor in Lugansk, because we have one significant factor in Crimea, which we don't have in Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kharkiv: Russian troops. Please believe me, if it not be a Russian troops on the Crimean territory, nobody will support the break of the Ukrainian unity, because the referendum is not actually happened. That was a fake. The people are not visiting there, and we don't talk even if it is legal or not. It was a fake because the people are not participating on that. The Crimean Tatar, Ukrainian people, and this is we have only one observer, is Russian sniper, who provide the results of the referendum. Believe me, if you have in any country any referendum and the machine gun of Russian sniper, the result would be the same. We don't allow Russian troops to be in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in Kharkiv, in Kherson, or in any other territory of Ukraine. We would pay very responsible attention to the interest of the minority, and we don't give any single chance to break Ukrainian unity. And there is another very important factor which we take into consideration. Me personally don't believe that Russia will attack, for example, Estonia or Lithuania or Latvia. Not only that this country is a NATO member, but if the level of the salary, the level of the pension, the level of the standard of living is triple higher than in Russia, nobody significantly support any idea of language, of church or anything like that. That's why our immediate priority is that in Kherson region, in the middle term perspective, the standard of living should be significantly higher than in the neighboring Crimea village. The freedom of press, the freedom of media, the defense of the human rights, the visa-free regime, the investment climate should be much higher. But people said, okay, we are happy to live here. And people in Crimea said, okay, what's this Russia going on do with us? And I think that would be the best answer for the aggression in Crimea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring in Katya Gorczynska at this point to add a few words on this subject.
Well, happy as I am to hear our leaders and potential leaders to exude leadership and confidence in Ukraine's future, I will have to play the devil's advocate, I'm afraid, and fisk a lot of the arguments that they have put forward about Ukraine's stability and future relations with Russia, particularly in the short term. When I really do believe that there's still a danger of Russian invasion, and this is why. When you say that Russian plan has failed, typically what we see on the Putin side is that the plan gets amended, and he still proceeds with his master plan. When we hear that there is no support for any further moves for separatism in eastern and southern parts of Ukraine, well, you know what? In 2012 parliamentary elections in Crimea, the pro-Russian forces did not get that many votes. The Sevastopol gave only 5% vote to the pro-Russian parties. My point is that there was no public support of separatism, and the pro-Russian movements were not all that strong. And my point is that, yes, the referendum did not take place in a legal way. It was, the power was not taken over by referendum. It was taken over in an instant in the Crimean parliament when a completely illegal vote was held and a pro-Russian politician was installed to run the peninsula. And this is why I think that the arguments a lot of central authorities representatives are appealing to are simply not working for me. And I would like to hear a better plan, a plan of how you're going to continue discovering how well our counterintelligence works, or military intelligence works. How much do we know of the Russian plans? And what is going to be Ukraine's response in the case when, again, we see similar scenarios playing out in Donetsk and southern Ukraine, for example. Also, the polls that we have seen before are not exactly relevant now, because what I have seen from the people's moods in the polls is in eastern and southern Ukraine, a lot of people did get inspired by the fact that there was no bloodshed in Crimea, and that Russia, which a lot of people in eastern Ukraine perceive as a stronger government, a stronger country, has taken over a territory that it claims will develop and pay a lot of attention to. And yes, a lot of Ukraine's territories have been neglected, and they feel abandoned, and they feel fearful of the current government. And I think that these are huge challenges that the government will have to address in the near future.
Katya, thank you very much. Petro Poroshenko, I saw you shaking your head at certain points during what Katya was saying and nodding at other points. Perhaps you could respond to some of the issues that she raises, and the issues she raises about concerns in some of the regions and the feeling that some of them have been left behind somewhat.
I have a rule not to have a very strong dispute with a journalist, especially with the Katya. I break my rule now. We don't have any conflict or discussion, actually. We should seriously improve our military force. We should pay a special attention to the rising up the level of the readiness of our both military and intelligence possibility. We should propose to the people of Ukraine and to the whole world the new structure of the security. Katya, this is not a problem for Ukraine or just for Ukraine. The invasion of Russia to Crimea is break all post-war security system in the world. Old system is simply not working. Budapest Memorandum is not working. United Nations Security Council's mechanism is not working. The bilateral and multilateral mechanism is not working. And this is not just a question for Ukraine, how to defend our territory, our sovereignty, our territorial integrity from the aggressor. This is how to build the new system. Me, as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, in year 2009, signed a letter to the State Secretary of United States, to the Foreign Secretary of United Kingdom, to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, to Russia and to China, that when Budapest Memorandum is need to be continued, we need a new form of the security treaty with the exact algorithm how we act if anything happens. They were rejected at that time and said, okay, we just send a letter for confirmation that Budapest Memorandum is still in force. No, that would be a complex mechanism how we can provide the security in the region, in the Europe, and in the world. Today we work with a sanction mechanism. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's not. But we very thanks for our American and European partners for the solidarity they pay with us. Today we stop, not we, but Western partners, stop any military, technical and political cooperation with Russia. Today we arrange the third wave of sanction, which can be even more effective. Today we seriously start to speak about the diversification of the energy supply and the energy security in Europe, which cannot have an immediate effect, but certainly have the effect in the middle term perspective. Today we have a new program for development Ukrainian intelligence. And now it's worked much more effective than 4 weeks ago in Crimea. That's for sure. We pay special attention to this question. Am I satisfied with the level of that? No. But we're improving the situation. And we should send absolutely strong message that if any soldier of any country will cross Ukrainian border, it would be a military answer, immediate. No chance that it would be bloodless invasion further to Ukrainian territory. That is absolutely strong signal we should deliver from Minister of Defense, from Ukrainian government, from Ukrainian parliament, and from the future Ukrainian president. We will defend our territory. In cooperation with our partners, we developed the new security treaty. We understand now that this is the right answer for the expectation of the Ukrainian people, because if Valery mentioned the opinion poll, all the previous years, the top priority or the top problem for the Ukrainian people was economic problem, inflation, danger of the finding up the jobs or losing the job, the economic instability. Now, not anymore. Top priority for the Ukrainian people is the security. And we should find out the right answer for that. But my main message on the beginning, so we can control the situation, that's for sure. We can find out the right answer on the negotiation with Russia, that for sure. I'm absolutely sure that immediately after the presidential election, the direct bilateral or multilateral negotiation with Russia will immediately start. And how firm would be position of the Ukrainians together with our international partners depend how quick would be the answer for the security question of Ukraine. Because without negotiation with Russia, it is not answer for the security question. Everybody understand that. But we should deliver just one main message. Ukraine, first, never ever recognize the aggression and annexation of Crimea. And we use all the mechanisms, legal, economic, international, people-to-people, humanitarian, to return back Ukrainian territory. This is first message. Second message, choice of Ukrainian state of the Ukrainian and Ukrainian people for the European integration is already done. And they should respect this choice. For everything else, outside of the federalization status, we can find out the compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to move on in a moment to talk about some of the Russian demands, if you like, the Russian proposals that have been put forward. But
As a red lines.
Yes.
Now
Yeah.
it's a special Russian term, red lines. This is not a proposal.
It does look a little bit
more
more.
like an ultimatum than a proposal in many ways. But Katja Gorczynska raised an important point that although some of the speakers had said that Russia's initial plans may have been thwarted with regard to Ukraine and further incursions, Russia is very good at improvising, modifying its plans and coming up with new ones. So I think it's important if we try and get a sense perhaps of exactly what we think Russia is trying to achieve here. And of course there's probably only one person who really knows that, and that's Vladimir Putin. If we try to get into Mr. Putin's head perhaps, what are Russia's aims? Did it set out with the aim of taking more territory back beyond just Crimea? We heard the Russian president in his speech at the Kremlin talk about places like Kharkiv as being formerly Russian territories. Does that raise the possibility that Russia still does aspire to taking those back? Or is the goal, do we think, just to put maximum pressure on Ukraine, create instability, and perhaps through that to install a government that it can control and influence? Perhaps if I go back to Valery Charlie at the end there on those questions, what do you think Russia's intentions are?
I'll try to answer short. First of all, I do not think that Ukraine is target for Putin. The target for Putin is replace the previous international order with new order, when Russia will play a significant role. So it seems to me like a Cold War period with two sides. One belonged to Russia and to Soviet Union, rest to the West. The second motivation is internal Russian motivation, because Vladimir Putin faced a very new challenges as radical movements in Russia, nationalist movements in Russia. They lose control in Russia, and they unfortunately find they're not the best way how to overcome that. They begin small, as they think, small victory on the Ukrainian direction, small war. It's a wrong, I think it's a wrong decision. It's, Mr. Putin may be a good tactic, but he is not good at strategist, because we understand that they push Ukraine to the best model of development, and Russia will lose in that case. But we face now this war among West and Russia on Ukraine territory. That's what we have now in reality. That's our problem. This I completely agree with Mr. Poroshenko. This is not only our war. It's a challenge for all international order, and just yesterday we received a new message about the willing to denunciation not only Black Sea agreement, Black Sea Fleet presence in Ukraine, but also Beloversky agreement. So what's happened? Vladimir Putin wants to destroy everything. So only thing that we are waiting for, where and when will be finished of that type of thinking. Because I'm optimist, I definitely think that Vladimir Putin will stop. But we need to make it early, to help Russia to unite it, to help Russia be stable, because Ukraine also will depend from Russian development. Russia will remain a big partner. Russia will remain a country on our northern border. Will not, unfortunately, will not see the Canada, for example. So we need to manage it. So and now we be pretty strong to help Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Is there anyone else on the panel who would like to come in on this point? Alexei, would you like to? Well, let's have Alexei Haran first.
Neil, you suggested two options for Russia, right? I think both options are aggressive, so they're bad for Ukraine. Both direct intervention or dictate over Ukraine. And the aim of Mr. Putin is to control Ukraine by different means. So if the plan A doesn't work, then he will use the plan B, trying to weaken the central government in Kiev, to transform Ukraine into an amorphous kind of federation, playing one region against another region. So I think we should resist this plan. Definitely, we don't need federalization. We need decentralization. But I guess we will talk more about it later, right? Okay, so decentralization is fine. And by the way, in the statement of Donetsk region council, as far as I understand, there were no mention about federalization. They were talking about decentralization, more autonomy, second Russian language, but not direct mention about federalization. I fully agree with Valery Chalis that Putin also needed this small victorious war for domestic reasons. Definitely yes. And just maybe side remark. I'm a academic political scientist, so I'm trying not to use strong words in my comments. But I believe that now what we see in Russia is actually creation of Mussolini-type regime, Mussolini-type fascism. So we have strong one party which is controlling everything, we have one person which is controlling everything. You do not have parliamentarianism. You have the play on messianism, chauvinism, and actual aggression in the foreign policy. The conclusion is yours. So I suggest that now it's possible to use this term regarding what Putin have created in Russia, unfortunately.
Petro Poroshenko.
Just want to remind that we are on an investor conference. Not on the security one. And I just want to stress once again, the main reason for the Putin aggression to Ukraine, this has nothing to do with Ukraine, nothing to do with the global security, nothing to do with the coming back to the Cold War or anything like that, I strongly believe. And nothing depends on Ukraine when they start this aggression. The only reason for Putin is internal. Taking into account the current situation in the Russian economy, stagnation, no perspective within the next 3-5 years after the shale gas revolution from the United States, or revolution on the energy market, after all the investors understand about the perspective of the Russian economy, and with the real absence of any reform on the Russian Federation, they need to mobilize the people. They need to propose to the Russian people the version why the situation is not improving. The only one explanation is, okay, we are Russia, and we are brings by Ukrainian, Americans, British, European, or anything to the complete isolation. And we should pay this price for the national pride. I hate this idea. And that's why we should immediately break this scenario and deliver the information. So we need the stable Russia. We need the predictable Russia. We, not only Ukrainian, we as a whole world. And that's why the negotiation with Russia would have also additional aim to break this scenario, not to give them a chance to use the real fact of isolation as an explanation for their own people, the real reason what's happened with Russia. That's why I think that we should have a consensus on that. The real reason for the aggression is internal. The consolidation of Ukrainian people, the unity of Ukraine, the very strong solidarity which already the whole world demonstrates to Ukraine is help us to help Russia, not only to help Ukraine. Thank you.
Did you want to come in?
We're about halfway through, a little over halfway through our time, so we're going to move on to the voting in a moment. But Katia Gorczynska, did you want to come back in on these issues?
Pretty much Petro Poroshenko answered your question about how decisions are taken in Russia. I mean, they are taken for the internal market, and therefore they are irrational from our point of view. And we have seen a lot of that in Crimea. I mean, the annexation was one thing, but joining Crimea with Russia was a completely irrational decision, as any economist will tell you. You know, even as a part of Ukraine, Crimea had two-thirds of the average GDP. It's totally dependent on fresh water, on electricity, on mainland Ukraine, on gas in peak times, etc., etc. I mean, the economic problems Russia is taking on are immense and not possible to solve. But, I mean, having said that, I also want to make a point that this makes the irrational decision-making style in Russia makes it even more dangerous for us, because it's more difficult to predict and it's driven by internal factors as opposed to of fears and plans, strategies that we expect looking out from the outside world. And this is why, yes, I agree that we should be fighting Russia together, that there should be solidarity and so on and so forth. But we should also be making plans. We should also be making contingency plans. What happens if Russia does walk into Ukraine's territory on the day of election and disrupts the election and then challenges the result because a certain percentage of the country voters have not been able to cast their ballots? I mean, I would like the government to be able to act in that direction and produce those types of scenarios and actually explain to us, the people, that they do have answers to those challenges and those short-term challenges.
Thanks very much. I'd like to move to the questions for the audience now, give you an opportunity to express your views, at least numerically. Okay. Peter tells me that not everyone has yet got the voting devices, so people are going to, I think, move among you and hand those out. In the meantime, I'll explain how they are used. In fact, no, I'll wait perhaps until they've been handed out. Okay, we'll come back to the questions in a moment. Let me ask something which we haven't touched on so far. Mr. Poroshenko, you correctly said this is an investment conference and not a security conference, but clearly geopolitical questions loom much larger, perhaps in most investors' minds right now with regard to Ukraine than with many other countries. So we do have to look at the security situation as well. One of the red lines, perhaps the biggest red line that Russia has indicated is Ukraine's membership of Western or North Atlantic security structures, above all NATO. I think there are many who believe that is the number one red line for Russia, is Ukraine's membership of NATO, which would take it right to take the alliance right to Russia's borders. Is neutrality in the future something that Ukraine could accept, or has the annexation of Crimea in particular made future neutrality something that is just impossible now to conceive of for Ukraine? Perhaps Mr. Poroshenko could answer.
During the whole Ukrainian history, the level of support of the Ukrainian integration to NATO not were above the 25%. The NATO all the time was a factor of the political struggle to any political campaign. The reason to break the country, the scenario to break the country. Today, this level of support is rising up to 39%, almost double. People start to understand how important is security question. But it is still 39%. And the answer, does Ukraine would be a member of NATO or not, is not in Kremlin, for sure. Unfortunately, sometimes it is also not in Kiev, like it was happened during the Bucharest summit in 2008, when some of the countries block the Ukrainian process of the integration to NATO. But today's answer would be the following. If the idea of NATO integration is below 50%, we cannot use this factor as additional factor of instability to break the unity of the country. And we should propose to the people the different mechanism for providing security, including the replacement of the Budapest Memorandum by the special security treaty with the country's guarantor. We can do that. And we already start this negotiation. During my visit and my meeting with the President Hollande or Prime Minister Cameron. And I think that would be a responsible position for providing up the new form of security in the region and in the world. But coming back to the red lines, okay, NATO integration is question number one. That would be decided in Ukraine. Most probably, we will not use that as a factor of breaking the country. Second red line is the second official language. No chance. But at the same time, decentralization of the authorities and giving the rights under the present legislation to have a possibility to speak any language, including Russian language, in the region where it is most popular, we provide and defend these rights for the people.
Just coming on that though, to many non-Ukrainians, this question of Russian language as a second official language might not appear such an unreasonable suggestion, given the large number of Russian speakers in the country. So if you could just spell it out, why is that just not an option?
Look, that's divided state and official language. Do you know, or do all of you know, that the only language outside of the Ukrainian language mentioning in Ukrainian constitution is Russian language, which is already have a special status under Ukrainian constitution. And we have adopted already the law about the regional languages, which completely defend all the rights of all Russian-speaking people, but at the same time it defends Moldavian, Romanian, Czech, Hungarian, or different languages. Because the Ukrainian language is a factor of unity of the nation, and we should take it into account. Another factor of Russian red lines, is not interference of any governmental or presidential possibility to the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. That can be guaranteed. We are not planning for any interference of the state to interference of the activity of the church. But the church itself would be, after that aggression, different. It is already different, and we should take it into account without any pressure or any action from the side of the Ukrainian government, that's for sure. So we have some other question, but that I have some more reason for optimism. When they break the scenario for the quick offense, for the quick war on the southeast of Ukraine, I'm absolutely sure now Russian try to change stick on carrot, and we should be very professional, very attentive how to build up the security, predictability, and economic cooperation with Russia under present condition, and we do our best for that.
Alexei Haran, we just wanted to make a quick addition, I think, on the language question.
On language issue. If you go out here in the center of Ukraine, in the capital of Ukraine, you'll hear that Russian language is not discriminated at all, vice versa. So the question is, why not to give the Russian language the status of the official language? We need to understand that Ukrainian language was discriminated for centuries. And in 1991, before the breakup of the Soviet Union, within the universities, only 10% of students were studied in Ukrainian language. So Russian was totally dominating the sphere of culture, education, and so on and so on. So by making Ukrainian the only state official language, we are helping Ukrainian language to improve its position. Still, Russian is very important in all the spheres of Ukrainian life. But if we make Russian language the state language, the second state language, it would mean further discrimination of the Ukrainian language. So this is the reality. So we need to try some other ways.
Thanks, Alexei. In a moment, I'm going to bring in Petr, who we've not heard from yet, to talk a bit about the research that his company has done on what Ukrainians want, what their attitudes are to some of the questions we're discussing. But first of all, let's get some opinions from the audience. I think everyone should now have the voting devices. So let me explain very quickly how to use these. You turn them on by pressing the button at the top left that has the on-off sign. Give that a good hard press to turn it on. And then you have a choice. I think our questions have generally 4 choices, or the last one has 3. So press A, B, C, or D as appropriate. And then, very importantly, press OK on the top right with the yellow arrows, or orange arrows. And you should then see on your screen an OK signal that your vote has been counted. If you don't see that, then try it again, and you'll have up to about 20 seconds to vote, I think. So let's have the questions. There are 4 of them. They're questions we haven't asked in the past because so much has changed in the last year. But the first one is on Crimea. A very simple question. Do you believe that Ukraine will regain possession of Crimea, A, this year in 2014? Option B, in less than 5 years. Option C is in more than 5 years. Or for the pessimists among you, option D, Crimea will never come back to Ukraine. If you would like to make your choices by pressing the buttons now, please. I think in a few moments we may hear some tones. There we are. Some of you may recognise those tones. For those of you who don't know, they're used in the Ukrainian Parliament. Okay, there is the outcome. Well, I'm afraid the chances of Crimea coming back to Ukraine this year are rated not very highly by you, only 1%.
Special thanks to this 1%.
And I'm afraid very narrowly the most pessimistic outcome has won, 39% saying that Crimea will never come back to Ukraine. I don't know if we want to say anything about that. And then after that, 38% saying it will take more than 5 years. So the majority of the audience here thinking that this is a very long-term prospect, to say the least, of Crimea returning to Ukraine's possession. I know some of our panelists...
It is optimistic if we have combined 1 + 2 + 3, so it's
We'll
optimistic.
compare the next year forum, we'll compare with these figures.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely optimistic if you have a chance.
Alexei Haran pointed out, I don't know if you could hear that if you add answers 1, 2 and 3, they are the majority, which means that people do believe, the majority believe that Crimea will come back to Ukraine. Of course, that is the majority view, just a difference on timing. Okay, the second question, let's move on to the second one now, one that the panel has discussed, but we're now interested in your views. Russia's objective in Ukraine, is it A, or number 1, to annex the country's eastern and southern regions, as we've discussed? Is it number 2, to make it a land of permanent turmoil, unpalatable for the likes of yourselves, investors? Is it number 3, to make Ukraine into a kind of protectorate by installing a loyal leadership in Kiev? Or is it number 4, essentially to leave it alone, having annexed and grabbed back Crimea. If you'd like to vote again in the same way, please make your choice now.
Okay, that tone means your time's running out.
Okay, so there we have a fairly clear majority there who believe that Russia's objective is basically to make Ukraine into a kind of protectorate by installing loyal leadership. 62% saying that. Only 6% believe that the objective is now to leave it alone after annexing Crimea, but relatively small numbers saying that that the objective is to annex any more of the territory, just 11%, or make it a land of permanent turmoil. Although 20% of you think that is the overall objective. Okay, let's go to question 3. Now, which is an assessment of how Ukraine has reacted or responded to Russia's invasion of Crimea. The first option is, do you believe that Ukraine has been too weak in its response, therefore leaving itself vulnerable to new incursions? Option 2, has it been correctly, perhaps strategically restrained in its response? Option 3, should Ukraine have included a military response to the invasion of Crimea? Or option 4, does it not matter, as Ukraine will anyway have to rely on Western help to stop Russia coming in further? Okay, so please make your choice from those 4 options starting now. There's the countdown. Okay, well there we have 50%, so not quite a majority, but exactly half of the audience suggesting that Ukraine perhaps has been right to be strategically restrained in the way that it responded to what was happening in Crimea. But just over a quarter suggesting that actually it doesn't matter so much as Ukraine has to rely on Western help to stop Russia anyway. Only 9%, interestingly, saying that it should have included a military response to Russia's invasion of Crimea. Okay, one final question for this panel. Okay, nice one to finish off with. Okay, so you've already all read it, but let me just read out the choices. Ukraine's next president will be, number 1, a woman, number 2, a man, or number 3, the elections scheduled for May the 25th will be postponed for one reason or another. Please make your choice, just 3 choices this time. Please make one now. Thank you. answer that. I should point out that there are a number of male candidates for president, and therefore we shouldn't perhaps read too much into that, of course. But anyway, 90% believe that the next president will be male, and then the rest split between 5% saying it will be a woman, and 5%, only 5%, interestingly, saying that the elections will not take place. I would like the only woman on our panel to perhaps respond to that final result, and then we'll move on.
I mean, what can I say except congratulations to Mr. Poroshenko for winning the primaries?
Not exactly a primary, but anyway, there we go. Thank you very much for giving us your views on that. Let's move on. We're in the final stages. In fact, we've only got about 20 minutes left.